same corruption that infects Louisiana happens on a larger scale in Washington.
We all know where oil comes from. Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. The political structure and the economic structure of those states are so dominated by oil interests, where the number one issue is profit.
One thing that is unique about Louisiana is we're a tiny state politically. We have single digits in terms of electoral votes, but we have an incredible influence on the national political scene.
The Senate is the most malapportioned body in the world. You have 2 senators from each state. You have 2 senators from Louisiana and 2 senators from California. Now, California, if it was a nation, would be the 7th largest nation in the world, and Louisiana is not close to that. The Senate's the only legislative assembly in the world that has a super majority to get things done. They need 60 votes to get things done. So it only takes a few senators to stop the initiative of the House of Representatives.
The Senate has the power to veto any bill created in the House. Of the 111 energy-related bills proposed in the last decade, every bill that contained provisions for alternative energy was blocked. The only bills that became law were the 5 that subsidized fossil fuels and nuclear. Another factor that contributes to the lack of regulation by Congress is the proverbial revolving door.
The Louisiana congressional delegation is known as the oil delegation. Our senators, when they retire, go to work as lobbyists for oil and gas.
There's a 2-year cooling off period before you can become a lobbyist out of the Senate. Senator Lott resigned from the Senate 1 month before the end of the session, so he didn't have to wait 2 years. He only had to wait 1 year. And then he had a party with John Breaux, invited all kinds of people to celebrate when the 1 year was over, and now the Breaux-Lott lobbying firm is very successful. They have lots of energy clients, lots of oil clients, coal clients, gas clients, and they have a lot of power.
You have an oil industry which is enormously powerful, which provides huge amounts of money in campaign contributions, has a very, very strong lobbying presence here in Washington, D.C., and they got a number of people on their leash.
With only 538 Congress members, the ratio of lobbyists to Congress in D.C. is almost 400 to 1.
There's probably 100,000 people in the lobbying business in Washington, D.C. So it's big business. After the federal government, lobbying is the next biggest business in Washington, D.C.
Lobbyists function as the razor-toothed guard dogs for big industry, making sure Congress does their bidding. But big oil uses a far more aggressive means of tightening its leash around Congress's neck.
Here's the reality. You're sitting there as a billionaire. You're making money on Wall Street, you're making money, maybe you're ExxonMobil. You can now contribute to some phony front organization which can then pour millions and millions and millions of dollars on television ads into campaigns all over this country. What it really is saying is that we're giving unbelievable power to a handful of people to control the politics and the nature of our democracy.
Meet billionaire brothers David and Charles Koch, 2 of the wealthiest oil men in America. During the last 10 years, they've given $198 million to conservative, pro-oil causes, including funding something called the Tea Party. Of 1,216 people seeking election in America's midterm elections, the Koch successfully funded 1,053 winners. According to their own party representatives, the Kochs have already set aside $88 million to sway the 2012 election to the candidates of their choice.
Today, the elected officials don't get elected unless they have huge war chests of money. Most of that comes from corporations, and almost all those corporations are closely tied with oil in one way or another.
There's a huge impact of campaign contributions in the Senate, and they have to raise so much money to run for election. I mean, House seats are $1 million, that's one thing. But when you're talking 20, 30, 40 million dollars in these Senate seats, the impact is to make it not very interesting to squeeze the oil companies.
They get people on key committees in the Senate and in the House, and they invest in them. They give them campaign money. It's open and it's legal. They have limits, but they also spend billions collectively over the years, billions, I'm not exaggerating, on advocating for their position, which is that they want to sell more oil and coal.
On a national scale, the oil companies have huge power over our government. But didn't we throw those oil guys out in the last election? Didn't we elect the guy who was going to change things?
I believe that Americans of every political stripe are desperate. They are hungry for a new kind of politics.
Most people who go into government go in because they care about what happens. They're there to change something.
I will never forget who this victory truly belongs to. It belongs to you. It belongs to you.
They're there to do some good, or they see something they think is wrong, and they go in, and then the process of being there and staying there changes them. I've seen it happen to people over the course of time, and resisting it is really difficult. People don't go in corrupt. There are very few people who come to the Congress or to the Senate who, from day one, are bad. I don't see any hope long-term for us unless we find a way to control campaign finance. It's going to be who has the most money.
Obama functioned as a brand, which is why Advertising Age gave him their top annual award, Marketer of the Year.
Barack Obama ran the most successful campaign ever. It was very smart, it was very well done, it was articulately laid out, and it capitalized on the desperation in this country that was so prevalent.
I know how difficult it will be to bring about a sensible energy policy in this country. ExxonMobil made $11 billion this past quarter. They don't want to give up their profits easily.
A lot of people on the left demonized President Bush and thought this was all about evil President Bush. And if we could just get rid of Bush, enlightenment would take over and we'd all be driving around in solar-powered cars and life would be beautiful within 3 or 4 weeks.
The powerful do not understand hope.
Chris Hedges is a former war correspondent, author of 9 books, and a member of the New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning team.
A democracy gives expression to the desires and concerns of ordinary citizens, whether that's through the press, whether that's through labor unions, whether that's through culture. An oligarchic system co-opts all of those institutions.
If you were a billionaire, you can sit down and say, okay, I'm going to put $300,000 into the race in Colorado, $400,000 into New Mexico, $500,000 into Vermont, and you spent that money. And nobody has to know who I am. I can do that with no disclosure whatsoever. This is a huge step backwards for democracy. It's a step forward for oligarchy, where a handful of extraordinarily wealthy individuals and large corporations have a major, major, major influence over our political life.
After the Obama administration came in with this big hopes of changing everything, getting serious about energy, getting serious about global warming, in certain ways has been as disappointing as President Bush was.
There's a great deal of antipathy, distrust, even anger towards liberals, and I don't think it's misplaced. It was the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton that deregulated the banking system, allowed our commercial banks to become hedge funds, and precipitated the meltdown that we are now undergoing. This was done consciously. Bill Clinton understood that if he did corporate bidding, he would get corporate money. And by the 1990s, the Democratic Party, late 90s, had fundraising parity with the Republican Party. And by the time Barack Obama ran for president, they got more.
When have the American people been as betrayed?
investing so much hope, energy, money in Barack Obama's campaign.
Today, we're announcing the expansion of offshore oil and gas exploration. I ultimately take responsibility for solving this crisis. I'm the president, and the buck stops with me.
Obama flies down to Florida, jumps in the water briefly with his daughter for the photo op, and from that point on, most of the media has left.
Beaches all along the Gulf Coast are clean, they are safe, and they are open for business. That's one of the reasons Michelle, Sasha, and I are here.
In reality, neither he nor his daughter touched the water of the Gulf. They swam at St. Andrews Bay, a protected area.
What happened with safety regulations in the Gulf of Mexico in the wake of the BP disaster? Rename a couple of agencies, change a couple of faces, business as usual, full steam ahead. What does that tell you?
The administration that had promised us change made no alteration to the antiquated spill response plan. It still cites walruses as the most threatened species in the Gulf of Mexico, and it still lists deceased people as the contacts in case of an emergency. Obama might have had a good reason to tread carefully when he dealt with the spill. The largest oil consumer in the world is the U.S., Department of Defense. And guess which company is the Pentagon's single largest supplier of fuel?
BP is the single largest oil contributor to the Pentagon. The U.S. war machine is heavily reliant upon BP and their oil.
During the last 10 years, BP has been the single largest energy contractor to the various branches of the U.S. military, receiving over $17 billion in direct contracts for jet and diesel fuel.
The oil industry, and BP in particular, is crucial to the military, intelligence, and diplomatic complex.
On June 16, 2010, Obama called a meeting at the White House with BP's CEO Tony Hayward, its managing director Bob Dudley, and its chairman of the board, Carl Henrik Svanberg. The U.S. government took no action against BP or its executives. Instead, it agreed that BP would simply create a claims fund for victims of the oil spill.
The people of the Gulf have my commitment that BP will meet its obligations to them. BP has publicly pledged to make good on the claims that it owes to the people in the Gulf.
I hear comments sometimes that large oil companies are greedy companies who don't care. But that is not the case in BP. We care about the small people.
Four days after his meeting with President Obama, Tony Hayward was enjoying a yacht race in England. Instead of being fired in the wake of the Gulf oil spill, Hayward was sent to run BP's operations in Russia, and it was back to business as usual.
You can throw out Tony Hayward, and they'll just pull another one out of their Frankenstein machine with a different hairdo and a different name. They all operate the same. You gotta get the oil out. The cheapest way is the filthiest, most dangerous way, and the most corrupt way. That's what makes these guys rich.
By January of 2011, the Obama administration announced it would start issuing permits for new drilling operations in the Gulf of Mexico. Why, you may wonder?
Big oil is paying the federal government a percentage, a royalty, that comes out of each barrel that comes out of the ground. It's an enormous amount of money. Behind the IRS, the collection of offshore oil field revenues and royalties is the second largest generator of money for the United States government.
The first new permit issued by the Obama administration was for a well in the Gulf of Mexico, operated in partnership with BP.
Today, you might better envision the planet as still this globe with 200 countries and huge clouds drifting around it that know no national borders. These are the big corporations. These are the multinationals. These are the oil companies. They don't follow any specific sets of laws. They strike deals with whoever can best serve their immediate needs.
corporation as we know it was created as an instrument to control and colonize the resources of other people. It is an instrument of wealth transfer from the many to the few.
Had it not been for the oil spill, BP would have been the most profitable oil corporation in the world in 2010. Even the financial loss due to the Deepwater debacle didn't stop the company from issuing $10 billion in profits to its shareholders.
Our whole